Good evening and welcome to the Coon Rapids City Council meeting for Tuesday, July 18th, 2017. If you could please rise and join us for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Griskoviak.
Here.
Councilmember Kicker.
Here.
Councilmember Demmer.
Here.
Councilmember Geisler. Councilmember Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Wells.
Here.
Mayor Cook.
Here.
One absent. Geisler.
Very good, thank you. Next item on our agenda is to adopt this evening's agenda. Motion by Wells, second by Kicker to adopt the agenda. Any changes or corrections? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And the agenda is adopted. We don't have any proclamations or presentations this evening, so the next item is to approve the minutes from our July 5th meeting.
Mayor.
Councilmember Griskoviak.
I'll move we approve the minutes from the July 5th, 2017 council meeting.
Second.
Motion by Griskoviak, second by Demmer. Any corrections or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Abstention.
That motion carries. One abstention, Councilmember Brad Johnson. Next on our agenda is our consent agenda. And the first item is to approve the final payment for project 14-27, 85th Avenue Trail construction. This was the final payment to Valley Paving Incorporated for that 85th Avenue Trail. And they came in under the final contract. All of the above dates and amounts are reasonable and accurate according to the project file. No liquidated damages are recommended. Staff recommends approval of final payment to Valley Paving Incorporated in the amount of $20,653.18 for project 14-27, 85th Avenue Trail construction. Next item, number 3, is on our consent agenda, and that's to adopt resolution 17-77, setting the levy hearing for miscellaneous assessments 2017-1. And we will be setting a public hearing as required by state statutes. At that hearing, the City Council may refer appellants to the Board of Adjustment and Appeals, and the Board of Adjustment and Appeals will then give their recommendation. The Board of Adjustment and Appeals is expected to conduct this hearing on September 7th and make a recommendation to the City Council at the September 19th council meeting. Staff will incorporate the process in the required mailing to the property owner. These assessments include services provided to taxpayers, in most cases code enforcement violations. The terms of repayment are determined by the amount being assessed, and the proposed assessments are categorized by the number of years to be assessed and the interest rate recommended. So this would be adoption of resolution 17-77, miscellaneous assessment declaring the cost to be assessed, ordering preparation of the proposed assessment roll, and ordering the public hearing for August 2nd on the proposed assessment roll. Next item on our consent agenda is number 4. Approve the Greenview Incorporated contracts for the recycling center and park staffing. The Coon Rapids Recycling Center contracts with Greenview Incorporated for the daily staffing needs. Public Works contracts with Greenview Incorporated for general cleaning of facilities within the park system. The only change to the contracts from previous years is an annual cost of living pay increase, and the contract for Public Works Parks is an annual term, whereas the Recycling Center term is only for 6 months through the end of 2017 to accommodate additional servicing and staffing needs. So that will be an approval of the attached Greenview contracts for park and recycling staffing. And the last item on our consent agenda item is number 5. Adopt resolution 17-80, authorizing donation of playground equipment. And playground equipment is being replaced at the Coon Rapids Soccer Complex. Staff is requesting authorization to donate the old equipment to the nonprofit organization Kids Around the World Incorporated, KIDS. This organization renovates used park equipment and reinstalls it in underprivileged areas around the world. and the city has made donation to kids in the past. So this will be to approve Resolution 17-80, authorizing a donation of used playground equipment to Kids Around the World Incorporated, a nonprofit organization, and to approve the agreement with Kids Around the World Incorporated for playground equipment removal and authorize the execution of the agreement by appropriate city officials. And that was our last item on our consent agenda.
Your Honor,
Councilmember Wells.
move the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion by Wells, second by Johnson. Is there any discussion or questions? I have one. Mr. Himmer? The playground equipment, I'm curious about the timing of the removal. It seems the last time we donated equipment to this organization, they removed it way in advance of when we were ready to work on the park. It seems like that was the case on Pheasant Ridge Park, wasn't that? Is there anything, do we have any say in the timing that it won't be until like we're ready to actually work on the park, or are we at their mercy?
If you go down to the park right now, it's already gone.
Never mind.
And the new one's already in.
New one's in. All right, that was important.
Okay, it's a good thing we've got this on the agenda tonight. Hearing no further discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, and that motion carries. Thank God. Okay.
Didn't want to go take it back from him.
Wrestling it away from those poor kids, All right, item 6 is to consider resolution 17-79, establishing a tax increment financing district 1-32, Riverdale Station Apartments. Following the July 18th council meeting, the EDA will consider several documents related to a transit-oriented development project on land currently owned by the Anoka County Regional Railroad Authority along Northdale Boulevard. Sherman Associates proposes a first phase of 251 apartments in 2 buildings on about 8 acres of the 16-acre site, as well as a small commercial building. A second phase will likely include senior housing on the balance of the site. In June 2016, the HRA entered into purchase agreements to facilitate the sale of the property to Sherman. The purchase agreements established that the HRA would purchase the entire site from the county for $2.3 million. Sherman would immediately purchase the land for phase 1 of the project for $1.5 million and would purchase the remainder of the land for $800,000 within 3 years of the closing date for phase 1. In June 2017, the closing date was extended to December 29, 2017, and the Planning Commission has approved a site plan for the project in June 2017, and the City Council will consider a plat at its July 18th meeting. The term sheet established that Sherman would receive tax increment financing for each phase of the project. At least 20% of the housing units will meet the affordability requirements established by state statutes for the use of TIF. While state statutes would allow up to 26 years of increment to be collected, the HRA's purchase agreement with the Anoka County Railroad Authority, is that who it is? Or ACRRA, limits the use of TIF to 10 years. A new housing TIF district will be established so that Sherman will receive incremental property taxes on a pay-as-you-go basis for phase 1 of the project. The total amount of increment paid to Sherman is expected to not exceed $2.276 million. These funds would be used to repay 2 TIF notes and would finance the project. It should be noted that the HRA is only pledging to pay up to this amount from available tax increment. In the event the project doesn't generate the amount of TIF identified in the notes, the HRA does not have to make up the difference. In order to create the new TIF district, the council must hold a public hearing, approve the TIF plan, and approve a modification to the redevelopment plan for the TIF project area number 1. So that'll be on our agenda, is to conduct a public hearing. Mr. Brown, is there anything you want to cover before we hold the public hearing?
I do have a brief presentation if you'd like that.
Love to see it. Perfect.
All right, and I can just refresh everyone's memories. Obviously, we've been talking about this project for a couple years now, and I know all of you have seen different components of it. meeting represents some of the final approvals that will be granted for it. So I just really wanted to kind of tie everything together. So for everyone in the audience, just a reminder, this project is on land that's currently owned by the Anoka County Regional Railroad Authority, adjacent to the North Star Transit Station along Northdale Boulevard, kind of behind Target, if you can picture about 15 or so acres. Just a recap of the timeline for this project. Back in about 2014, task force of Coon Rapids council members as well as several county board members had toured some various transit-oriented development projects around the metro area in an effort to find a developer who would do a project at this location. Through that process, by about early 2015, Sherman Associates have been identified as a potential developer. The group talked to a few others as well. Sherman came forward with a very viable proposal, had a track record of doing similar projects, and they had proposed kind of a multifamily and mixed-use project on the site, primarily residential, but would also include a small commercial component. Throughout 2015, the city, the county, and Sherman had negotiated a project, and finally in April of 2016, the council and HRA had approved a term sheet that outlined the sale terms and kind of the financial assistance that would be provided for the developer. And actually the deal that is before you tonight looks very similar to what was originally intended by that term sheet. So not a lot has changed since that time. In June of 2016, the council and HRA approved purchase agreements with the county and with Sherman that stipulated the terms of the real estate portion of the project. In October of last year, we held a public open house and invited all the people in that immediate neighborhood, got some good feedback from them, and just kind of got them familiar with the project before it went through the approval process. Just last month, the Planning Commission approved the site plan for the project. Public hearing was held. I believe there wasn't really any public testimony there. The neighbors were notified, so by that time everyone was pretty familiar with the project. And now where we're at is that the council, and then following this meeting, the EDA will meet to establish the TIF district and approve the plat. At this point, Sherman is planning on closing on the property in October, and hopefully construction will still begin this fall. This is just, again, to kind of refresh your memories, the full station area plan. So what we're considering tonight are the two buildings, the southernmost buildings that are adjacent to the parking lot. That represents phase one of the development project. So basically, the HRA is purchasing the entire 15 or so acres from the County Rail Authority, selling the phase one land to Sherman this fall. The HRA will retain the northern portion of the site. Sherman is agreeing to purchase that within 3 years of the closing date for phase one. Their phase two project most likely will include a senior housing component and a couple other buildings, and that will build out the site. You'll also be asked a little bit later in this meeting to consider the preliminary plat for the project. The Planning Commission had considered that last month, and that does go before you. The site plan does not go to the council in that zoning district, so that action of the Planning Commission is now, I guess, considered final. And here are some renderings of the exteriors of the building. So it's more contemporary architecture, kind of different from other apartments in Coon Rapids. You can see the small retail building there right along Northdale Boulevard, and then apartments behind it. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the TIF request and the items that are before you tonight. So as I mentioned before, the HRA has a purchase agreement with the Anoka County Regional Rail Authority, which is actually comprised of the county board members. They had formed that entity when North Star was in the planning process. So we have those purchase agreements. the county felt strongly, being the seller of the land, to kind of put some constraints on the amount of tax increment financing that went into the project, just because they, were not that excited about, having property off the tax rolls for a long period of time. It was important to them to get that property back on the tax rolls sooner rather than later. So we're looking at about 10 years of tax increment. The total that's allowed by state law for a housing project is 26 years. So the current request reflects what was agreed to in the 2016 term sheet. The phase one of the development is expected to generate about $2.2 million over that approximately 10-year period. And in order to qualify the project for tax increment financing in a housing district, 20% of the units will meet affordability requirements. So 80% of the apartments will be market rate, 20% will be restricted to households earning no more than 50% of area median income for the period of that TIF district. And so tonight, the council is asked to hold a public hearing and adopt a resolution to create the TIF district. Following this meeting, the EDA will be asked to adopt resolutions approving the TIF plan, also an interfund loan to address administrative costs, as well as a development agreement. I'll mention that the current version of that development agreement just was prepared last week, so we're still going back and forth with the developer. And as is often the case with these projects, their lenders may continue to have some changes to that agreement. So you'll be asked to approve that agreement substantially in the form that's provided. If there are some changes that are requested that are beyond just kind of minor administrative changes, there's some chance we'd bring that back for a second consideration. But other than that, this really represents the remainder of the approvals. You can see the map on the right-hand side there shows the location of this district in black. That term sheet with Sherman and with the county did also provide for up to 10 years of TIF for the phase two project, so that would require establishing a separate district. So with that, if you have any questions, I can certainly answer them. We do also have a representative from the developer, as well as Ellers, our financial advisor, and Scott is available to answer any questions more related to the site plan or the development project itself.
Mr. Brown, was this always 20% of that whole project? I always thought the first building was going to be all market rent, and then 20% of the second building was going to be affordable. I didn't remember there was going to be 20% of the whole project affordable.
No, it is 20% of the whole project, and that's what we've been talking about all along. So that first building, the larger building, will be entirely market rate units. The second smaller building will be primarily affordable units. So in the overall project, there will be about 55 affordable units. 251 units is the total in the whole project.
251 is the total of the two buildings.
Yep, that's right.
Okay, the whole phase one, all right.
Yep.
Questions?
Yeah.
Councilmember Kicker?
So, Ben, the TIF over 10 years is supposed to generate 2.76. Now, how do we come up with that number? How is that number?
Yep, so we had worked closely with our financial advisor on, looking through all of the financial aspects of this project, and made a lot of assumptions about, what the future value is going to be and what the project is going to generate in taxes. And that amount, I will say, so the developer is able to borrow against that amount and repay a note. So if the amount, for whatever reason, the value is a little bit lower, it comes in below that, that's still, that's what we're giving the developer. The city isn't kind of on the hook for that.
What happens if it comes above?
If it comes above, we intend to cap it at that amount. We do feel strongly that any city financial assistance that's going into the project reflects the actual need for gap financing. So that, yeah.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Johnson.
Mr. Brown, just to put this in a little perspective, how long has this property been vacant?
It's been vacant for its entire existence, as far as we know. Anoka County, the rail authority, had purchased it back in the early 2000s.
So for the last more than a decade, it's been off of the tax rolls.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Brown, anything else before we open the public hearing then?
No, that's all I have for now.
All right. So then establishing tax increment financing District 1-32 for the Riverdale Station Apartments, I will open the public hearing. Is anybody here to address council for the public hearing for the TIF district for the Riverdale Station Apartments? Anybody here to address council for the public hearing? You working your way around here?
Council Mayor Phil Roser, 10640 Mississippi Boulevard. My reason for being here is I'm not against Sherman and Associates necessarily developing that. Everybody would like to see it developed. I am concerned about the fact that Sherman and Associates is in effect paying $2 million for the land, and we're going to turn around and give them $2 million back. So they're actually not paying anything for the land if you really start looking at the numbers. And what this does in the marketplace is it creates an unfair balance for developers like myself who pay full boat on their real estate, put up their projects, do not get any handouts from the city or the county. They've got a 20% discount. They can charge less rent because I, as a taxpayer, am subsidizing that project, and it's not fair. And we have used tax increment in the past. I'm a big player when it comes to tax increment. When there is a shopping center or something like that that needs to be torn down, I'm all for subsidizing that person that buys that to redevelop it and getting them back to what I call zero, which is the actual land cost. I have no problem with that. I think that's a good use of tax increment. In this case, there's never been a developer on that site that I'm aware of in the 50-some years that I've been in the marketplace, and it's really never had a for sale sign on it. I suspect with the market as hot as it is, we could have gotten a developer to come along for a lot less money. I realize this is probably going to pass because the council's very giddy about getting that property developed. But my next concern is Coon Rapids Boulevard, which won't be far behind, and we're going to be in here again asking for tax increment. And it's just not fair to the people who have lived here, built this city, and then have someone else come in and get a big discount. It's just not fair. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Roser. Is there anybody else to address council for the public hearing on the TIF district? Anybody else to address council in the public hearing? We'll close the public hearing, reserve comment to the council. I find myself agreeing with that. I remember we set up a TIF district down on Coon Rapids Boulevard for the Autumn Glen building, but that was to tear out the old Frank's Nursery building to get the ground back to zero. You know, and I think we are going to be considering it when we're looking at the Pedersen Floral site and all of that, to get it back to zero again. And I have been a little trying to figure this out because it is just bare land. And I'm not sure what we're bringing it back to, what the purpose of the TIF in this is, other than just being an incentive, and maybe it is just an incentive. Is that the case, Mr. Fernandez?
Mr. Mayor and council. So the tax increment assistance that's contemplated tonight is largely to us, well, it is to assist the affordable project. That's what we can do under state law. However, in order to get the market rate project that we've talked about, market rate apartment project, we really need to have a project that includes both elements. That's just the reality of trying to finance a project these days. It does cost more than the market can bear in terms of rent. So there is a gap on this project, and that's essentially why the city is stepping in to help the developer, complete this project. This development of 250 units of housing, we think there's demand for it. We don't have any contemporary housing in Coon Rapids that's been developed, I think, in the last, well, we obviously had the more recent senior project, but in terms of general occupancy, market rate housing, we haven't had anything constructed in more than 20 years. So we think there's demand for this project. There is a legitimate gap in terms of developing it, and that's the reason why the city is stepping in to help facilitate the development with the TIF.
Thank you.
Public hearing's closed.
Public hearing's closed.
Okay, so I know TIF is always going to be controversial. In this case, this is pretty much what I remember us talking about from very early on, that there'd be some sort of TIF. I remember having to make that part of the deal with the county. And I think the two things that make me able to support this, even though I do understand Mr. Rosar's position and it does make it difficult, is that it is a pretty short TIF as far as things go. I could easily see this land sitting vacant for 10 more years. And if we do the TIF now, yes, they do get a leg up for the 10 years, but then it's taxes that we collect from there on. And I think that the lifespan of this building will bring revenue in that we would not get otherwise. It does make it more difficult in the competition sense. I don't necessarily see the bulk of this building as directly competing with very much that's currently in the city. And so those are sort of the factors at play, and it's not always an easy decision. I think the biggest thing is, because this is what we've been talking about since day one, and we've worked with the developer, it would be difficult to then turn around and say, well, never mind, we're not interested in that project. So I support using it. I agree it's a lot easier to use TIF when it's something that's a tear down than a well, we just want to close a gap. A shorter TIF district like this does seem like it ultimately benefits the city a lot more than leaving the land vacant. So, unless anyone quickly raises their hand, I'll move to adopt Resolution 17-79, modifying the redevelopment plan for project area number 1 and establishing TIF District 1-32.
Second, may I add, well stated, Councilman Demmer.
Yes, you may. And you did, I guess.
Yeah.
We have a motion by Demmer and a second by Wells. Discussion.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Johnson.
I would just add to those comments, with which I agree, that I think there's also a value added as a result of this project. Not only is it a project that puts potential residents of Coon Rapids in proximity to rail, but it also brings in 250 new units next to Riverdale. And those are people that can, live, work, and shop in that district. So I think there's a value added that also benefits the city of Coon Rapids. It makes it appealing to me, and that's part of the reason I'm going to support it.
Further discussion? Councilmember Griscoviac?
I'd just like to say that I echo Mr. Rosar's sentiment on the $2.6 million of land value here. A normal district would run for 26 years, and I think that the county and the city have made a pretty good trade-off in making sure that this is going to be limited to just 10 years. And 10 years moves along pretty quick in the community. I think that is sufficient for me to support this.
All right. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? And that motion carries. All right, item number 7 is to consider planning case 17-10, appeal the planning commission's approval of site plan for parking lot expansion, Adams Elementary, 8989 Sycamore Street, Anderson Johnson Associates. Mr. Harlicker, you want to do this, or do you want me to read your notes here?
Your Honor and council members, I can do a summary. I also have a PowerPoint presentation
Oh, come on up.
like that. Okay. A little background on the project. Excuse me. On May 18th, the project was proposed for expansion of the Adams Elementary School parking lot. The property is located off of 89th and Sycamore. It's highlighted there in black. What the school district is proposing to do is to expand that existing parking lot, add some parking spaces, and create a larger drop-off area and pickup area for students, for parents to drop off and pick up their students. And this was originally presented to the Planning Commission at the May 18th meeting. This is the existing parking lot. This area here is what's being removed. And this is the proposed expansion. There was a public hearing at the May 18th meeting. Following that meeting, Planning Commission postponed action on this item to the June 15th meeting. That allowed the school district to come back with a revised plan to address the screening issue that was raised at the public hearing. They added trees there and there to block the headlights as cars went around the drop-off area. Following a brief discussion on this item, at the June 15th meeting, the Planning Commission approved the site plan with the additional evergreen trees. Residents appealed Planning Commission decision, and we received the appeal on June 26th. The neighbors on 89th, or excuse me, on 90th, which is the cul-de-sac there, were the residents that appealed the Planning Commission decision. The applicant, school district, has submitted a revised plan. They did meet with a number of the residents on that cul-de-sac and listened to their concerns and came back with this revised plan. They added 40 evergreen trees along the property line between the residents and the school district property, as well as added speed bumps at the drop-off area for traffic calming. With that, City Council can affirm the Planning Commission's site plan approval. They can reject the Commission's approval, or amend the conditions, the planning commission's approval. Staff is recommending that the council amend the planning commission's approval and approve the revised site plan that's being presented tonight. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Johnson?
What feedback have you gotten, Mr. Harlicker, from the residents now that there's been a revised site plan that's been kind of resubmitted? Have they had an opportunity to be heard in front of the planning commission on this newest plan?
Commissioner, or Councilmember Johnson, no, they have not. This was developed following planning commission approval, and after talking, the representative of the school district met with the residents, and after that discussion, they came up with this revised plan.
And has the city heard anything from those residents in the meantime?
I have not. I've had a conversation with a couple of residents, and they raised other concerns apart from the evergreens. Part of it was down in this area here, there's already a lot of existing trees in that area. One of the residents questioned, well, is there going to be enough room for these additional trees?
What, obviously this is an elementary school, and some of the primary concern is one of headlights in this roundabout, essentially the turnaround area that's there as cars sweep through and shine their lights into the backyards of the people who live in that cul-de-sac neighborhood. Is that, do I understand that correctly?
That was one of the primary concerns, correct.
Okay, thank you.
So the issues raised in the appeal, those were raised prior to them adding the trees in. That's what Councilmember Johnson just figured out, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Demmer?
So can you remind us what the purpose of the parking lot expansion was? I'm assuming, so this is the school that my kids go to, that they just wanted more spots. Is it more than that? I know that that back corner floods quite a bit, so I assume they're also trying to get rid of the flooding, but that during a lot of events, people end up parking up in that grass area, and they're trying to turn that into parking and have less people park in the neighborhoods. But were there any other reasons why they did the parking lot expansion in the first place?
Councilmember Demmer, I believe the two reasons. Primarily, it's to add drop-off area. Right now, you've got parents that are dropping kids off in the cul-de-sac, along Sycamore, along here, and I believe even down along there. And what they're trying to do is to give parents more room to drop their kids off, as well as add parking spaces. I think the addressing the drainage and creating a better drainage area in this area south of the turnaround area there is secondary to the improving drop-off and parking.
And they're giving up that playground there, which, you know, they did build a new playground in the back of the school, and I guess I can understand why you wouldn't want a playground right by the parking lot, so maybe it's partially that as well, but the concern about the headlights, when I read it, it sounded more like they were concerned not about people dropping their kids off. They were concerned that well after school hours, people would be driving around in that parking lot for fun. Did I read that right? It didn't sound like it was specific to the drop-off. They said racing around, so I assumed they were talking about non-school drop-offs that they were worried about.
Yeah, Councilmember Demmer, the school district's revised plan did add speed bumps there and there at the beginning and end of that turnaround area to help calm traffic as they went around.
Okay, so they didn't
that
just
part of the
add
parking lot.
trees to avoid the lights. They're also adding stuff to reduce the
Correct.
desire to go racing. Okay.
That's how every Minnesotan learns how to drive in the winter.
Oh, yeah.
It's in a school parking
Fishtail in the
lot.
school parking lot.
All right. Yeah, and I can understand how that feels to the neighborhood when that's always been like a park in the backyard for them. And it sounds like there was some, even some misunderstanding as far as whether that was a park or whether it was part of the school. But it does belong to the school, and I think they've got a right to do with it what they choose. I think they've gone a long ways to address the concerns. It's never going to be, change is always hard. When you're removing a park-like area and a playground from the back that always felt like it was part of your usable space, I can imagine it's difficult. But I don't see any way of, I think we need to let the school district do what they're going to do, is my opinion. Councilmember Johnson.
I would just follow up by saying, I mean, I'm not going to micromanage how they design their parking lot in this, but these are my constituents, and I'm going to vote against an approval of the revised plan in this situation, because I want my constituents' voice to be heard in this meeting. I am a little perplexed by the design, I have to say, though, because if you're going to put a drop-off spot, why are you creating the area for the drop-off spot to be in the furthest place away from the school that's there? If I understand right, it's the drop-off spot is in this turnaround here.
Correct.
And so that is literally moving them out to the farthest part of the lot away from the school. So for those two reasons, because people in the neighborhood have expressed this concern, and I agree with them, there's a legitimate concern there, and because it doesn't seem to accomplish, at least in my mind, the goal that the school district is trying to achieve, I'm going to vote against it.
I suppose they feel they would rather have them on the sidewalk, even if it's away from the school, rather than getting dropped off on 89th or on Sycamore or anything else.
I'm sure there's a logic there. I'm sure there is.
My guess is that it's by giving more total feet of drop-off that they're trying to keep the backup from backing up all the way
Sure.
onto the road, so they've.
Right.
Help traffic.
Sure. And, you know, they still have to have that front area for buses, so there's not a lot of places. I mean, you could, yeah, I don't know. It seems like it will reduce the number of people who tailed out into the street.
I will be surprised if this changes behavior, though. I mean, if you went into that cul-de-sac that's just, you know,
Yeah.
or in the other neighborhood so that you could get on and off of East River Road real easy to drop your kids off, I don't see it driving into this long roundabout.
Yeah,
but-
you're not dropping them off at different spots because you think the parking lot's small. You're dropping it off because you don't want to wait in the line.
Right.
All right, Councilmember Griscoviac?
I think Brad just made a great point there. Councilmember Demmer asked, why do they need a bigger parking lot? I was going to ask the same question. Have they expanded the school? Do they need more parking? Well, that hasn't been the case. It's obviously a case of just the changing attitude that parents have in getting their kids to school. More and more parents are driving their kids to school.
They
So I-
have expanded this school in the last couple of years, though. They did build a whole new wing.
They did, okay. So that is two-part then. But I think you make a good point. Is this to allow more parents to drive through in a better fashion, or will they simply revert back to what's going on right now? That's a really good question that I have.
Yeah, Councilmember Wells.
I can't question the school district's intention. They have to make it as safe for the kids as they can. And I've been involved in some of these, and unfortunately, some parents don't care about the safety of their kids, and they'll do what's convenient for them. But I think the intentions of the school district, they have to think about the safety of the kids, and I don't think we should doubt that that's what they're wanting to do here.
I agree with Councilmember Wells. I mean, based on, my kids went to that school, so I'm very familiar with that area, and I agree. I mean, there are changing ways of getting kids to school. Everybody, all the parents want to bring their kids. It's more convenient. Don't want them to ride the bus, whatever. But I think the school district's definitely looking after the kids in this case and trying to make it a safer drop-off area.
There is a changing way to bring the kids to school.
Yeah.
Hanson Boulevard, you always hit the school zone for Epiphany. I've never seen a kid walking. You know, everybody's either on a bus or getting dropped off by their parents. I don't know, but, all right. So, what's your wishes here, council?
Your Honor.
Councilmember Demmer?
So I think if we're going to vote on anything, we should probably vote on the amended one, because, you know, we'd rather do the amended one than the one that nobody likes. So in planning case 17-10, move to staff recommendation of approval of the amended application.
Mr. Harlicker?
Is that close enough? There we go. Appeal Planning Commission approval of amended site plan for parking lot expansion at Adams Elementary.
Revised.
Revised. Okay, sorry.
Okay, good.
Second.
Motion by Demmer, second by Kicker, to affirm the planning commission's site plan approval, reject the commission's approval, I'm sorry, so I should have just stopped. So we are going to amend the commission's approval and approve the revised site plan, landscape plan. That was your motion?
That's what we should vote on. Yep.
That's your motion, okay. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
That motion carries. One opposed, that's Councilmember Johnson. Thank you, Mr. Harlicker. I suppose you're going to be up there for number 8 as well? We're looking at, in planning case 17-13, preliminary plat, Riverdale Station Apartments for Sherman Associates.
Yes, Your Honor and council members, Mr. Brown gave a good presentation as far as he covered the preliminary plat. It's really a 2-lot, 3-lot subdivision, 1 lot for each apartment building and the commercial site, and then an outlot for the second phase of the project, which is the senior housing component. Planning Commission recommended approval of the preliminary plat. At the public hearing, no residents spoke at the public hearing.
Council?
All right.
Alrighty then.
All right.
Councilmember Demmer.
In planning case 17-13, move to approve the preliminary plat for Riverdale Station Apartments with the following conditions: engineering comments addressed and park dedication paid.
I'll second it.
Motion by Demmer, second by Johnson. And, okay, that was a full motion.
I think I got it all.
Do you need them in separate motions, or?
I asked that you consider
The whole thing.
flexibility, dimensional flexibility.
Oh, I missed that part.
Okay, that's what I was wondering about.
Additionally,
Okay.
dimensional flexibility.
I'll re-second it.
All right, so the amended motion and the amended second are okay. Discussion. Councilmember Kicker.
So with this, it talked about giving us some discretion on the $1,300 or the $5,000 per acre commission site. We're not touching that?
So this would include
Dedication funds.
park dedication for the plat must be paid prior to the issuance of building permits in the amount of $1,300 per unit for the apartments and $5,000 per acre for the commercial site unless otherwise determined by the council.
Right. We're not.
That was not the motion.
You know,
making
if
sure.
if somebody has a strong reason why
No,
they
I-
don't want that, I would accept an amendment. haven't heard a reason
No.
in prior conversation. Okay.
No, I'm just making sure.
Okay. Further discussion?
Uh,
Councilmember Demmer?
So I think we had some guests come for this one, if this is the one they're here for. I don't know if there's anything they wanted to specifically say, or if there's any
Is there anything
questions we
the
have for
architects
that.
wanted to say on this one, or just in case?
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And that motion carries. All right. Consider Resolution 17-78 granting preliminary approval to Drake MDG Limited Partnership seeking state funds to purchase and rehab the Drake Apartments. The Drake Apartments consist of 48 affordable units that are covered by the Section 8 Rental Assistance Program. The property consists of 18 two-bedroom units and 30 three-bedroom units. The property has historically maintained occupancy between 95% and 100%. The property was originally constructed in 1977 and underwent a renovation in 2001 by the current owner. The purpose of the new transaction would be to upgrade building amenities and all units to ensure the property is competitive in the market for years to come. As part of the overall transaction, the borrower will complete renovations totaling roughly $25,000 per unit. The permanent financing will include the issuance of tax-exempt revenue bonds by the City of Coon Rapids and the sale of 4% low-income housing tax credit equity, LIHTCs. It should be worth noting that the city is not obligated for debt repayment of the project. The city will be acting in a conduit capacity and issuing the bonds on the developer's behalf. The borrower would be responsible for bond repayment. Sharon is not here. Mr. Fernelius or anybody, is there anything anything else that needs to be said here?
Mr. Mayor, I think you kind of covered, I think the key points. The resolution that's before you does a number of things that I thought I would just point out. So one is that it makes some findings of need for this particular project. It also authorizes a public hearing. Normally, we would identify the public hearing date. We don't know if they're going to be successful in getting an allocation of bonds and tax credits. So what this does is it authorizes the city to hold a public hearing, but we'll have to identify that date once we know more about that. It also establishes the maximum amount of the bonds, which would be at $8 million, and then authorizes the city to recover some of those costs, particularly related to issuing the bonds that the developer would pay back to the city. I did include some information that the developer submitted, so there's some additional background information, just in terms of the rehab, in case the council is curious about what exactly will be done. What they've identified is that the windows will be replaced. They'll be working on the roofs to extend the life of those roofing systems, if you will. They're also going to update the entrances to both buildings, as well as the heating systems, and then upgrade the kitchens and bathrooms. So a fairly, I think, significant amount of rehab for a building of that age to continue to make sure that it's attractive and well-maintained, and also has that affordable component. I did check with our code enforcement staff, and I think this building has been well-maintained. I don't know that we've had any issues with it in the past. I believe the borrower is here along with one of their representatives. If the council has any questions of them, we didn't ask them to make a presentation, so we could certainly stand for questions if council has any.
Council, any questions for them, or? Seems pretty straightforward. Councilmember Kraskowiak?
Clarification. Just wanted to make sure that the city really is just facilitating this issuance. There is no effect on our overall debt load or our credit rating, so to speak. And we're not responsible for the repayment of the bonds. Is that all correct?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Kraskowiak, yes, that's correct. We're acting in a conduit capacity. It does not really affect our our credit rating, and we're not responsible for paying the bond. So we're functioning in what's called a conduit capacity, but other than that, we have no obligations for repayment.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Demmer?
All right, when groups in our city want to improve their buildings and, ask for permission to do so, it's pretty hard to say no. So I would move to approve Resolution 17-78, granting preliminary approval to Drake MDG Limited Partnership seeking state funds to purchase and rehab the Drake apartments.
Second.
Motion by Demmer, second by Kraskowiak. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion carries. All right. Item 10, looks to be a popular one this evening. Consider introduction of an ordinance amending the Class B off-sale liquor regulations. This is just an introduction. This matter was discussed by the City Council at work session on May 9th and July 5th, and based on those discussions, an ordinance was prepared for introduction. The proposed ordinance would amend the definition of Class B to allow the sale of intoxicating liquor and reduce the square feet of floor area as a principal use required to 25,000. Additionally, the restriction as to the number of licenses allowed and the proximity limits have been removed, and the ordinance is attached for review. And I know from our May, I don't even know what the dates now, but I know one of the things that apparently is surprising was the dropping the square footage from 50,000 to 25,000, and we did have a pretty robust conversation about that to try and incentivize, I thought, other grocers to come into town. My question with this, and again, this is just an introduction, so if you have issues or would like to talk to us, make sure you reach out to your council members or myself, is I thought it was to incentivize grocery, and in here it says somewhere,
Took wine out of it.
it says retail.
Under definitions.
Under definitions? Thank you. Why didn't I highlight that? All right. Yeah, in conjunction with and secondary to a permitted or conditional principal retail use, which shall have a minimum floor area of 25,000 square feet. And my question is would council be okay with changing that or using something, whatever the accepted word is for grocery? Because I don't think we're trying to just do an overall expansion of liquor. I don't think we're looking to have it attached to a Menards or something else. I thought we were trying to incentivize grocers. And I'm just wondering, is there a word that, could we replace retail with some acceptable grocery or whatever that word, I don't know if there's a technical term for groceries. But Mr. Stemwedel?
Mayor, Council, that certainly could be decided upon or explored at the council's direction. The change from to add in retail was to address the conversation at the last work session regarding sort of unique circumstances where really a clearly non-retail entity or building might go, well, this looks like a convenient way to incorporate liquor into our business operation, get one of these Class B licenses. So this retail was added to the definition, as well as it should be noted that zoning, of course, would restrict where liquor stores could be located. In this case, it'd be retail areas. So that's where the retail came from. Certainly, if council's interested in further defining that, that's at your discretion.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Johnson?
So I agree with you. This is actually the first time we've had an opportunity to see the language as it's kind of laid out. And of course, that comes in our, packet a few days before the meeting. And I was at the May 9th meeting, but not able to attend the one on July 5th where it was a workshop and it was being discussed. I have since heard from virtually all of the Class A license holders on the impacts that they feel this may make on their businesses. And of course, they've invested significantly in the city, and I don't feel I, as a council member, have had a fair enough opportunity to consider that, especially in the context of the language and how that all plays out. So I'd like their input. So at this point in time, what I'm going to do is move to table the formal introduction of this pending another workshop where we can get that input. And the reason I'm doing that is I don't want it to be kind of fast-tracked to be put on the next meeting without having that additional input. So that's my motion.
Okay. Dies without a second. Further discussion? Any questions? Am I okay with my Roberts there? There was no second.
I was gonna say, I'd call for a second. I'd give an opportunity.
So we have the
And
discussion.
there's no discussion. If you table it, we're done.
You have to vote for the tabling. You don't, a second doesn't table it.
He
No,
sec- he
no, but
seconded
there's-
my understanding is he is now seconding the motion to table.
So we have the discussion on the motion, right?
But there's no discussion on tabling, is there? Isn't there just a vote?
No, I think there is a discussion on table.
All right, thank you. Didn't bring my Roberts rules.
So
Okay.
I feel like we've had a few meetings on this, and if this was the final reading, I would definitely support tabling it to get the wording right. But as an introduction, we have the ability to table the final at the next meeting if there's significant changes. We also have the ability to amend, and if the amendments are small enough, you wouldn't have to redo it. If they were large enough, we would probably want to table it anyway. So I don't have any problem with the introduction going through, but I reserve any right to delay the final if we make really significant changes or if we get really significant input, is the way I would prefer to handle it than tabling the introduction.
Okay, I think we kind of skipped over something there. So we did have a motion to table, and then you seconded the motion to table, and then now you're discussing it, because that's okay. All right, is there any other discussion on tabling it?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Johnson.
I would respond to that by saying if there is that concern about the language, which we've only had for a couple of days, you know, y'all, and frankly, the people that this could impact the most, the Class A license holders, have only had it for less time than even we have. So they haven't been able to look at this and give us input. And there is no formal mechanism for us to really be able to get that input from them like I think we should have the benefit from when it comes to the next hearing. Now, a question I would like to ask council is, will they have an opportunity to address the council in open hearing when the ordinance is up for a vote post-introduction?
Typically, we do not, as
Right.
a procedure, provide for that.
So we won't be able, as a body, as a council, to hear from them all together and to be able to interact. We can hear from them individually or by email, but we won't be able to have that same discussion at the next meeting. And that's why I think it's appropriate to give them an opportunity to have that input at a workshop, in which case we can then put it back on for an introduction and then potentially an adoption, if it's something we decide we want to go forward with.
Councilmember Wells?
I disagree with Councilmember Johnson. We've had 2 workshops on this, and am I in love with this ordinance? Not necessarily, but if we reword it or whatever, I've heard them before, and it doesn't take, I understand if I have a business in town and we're passing an ordinance that could affect their business, I wouldn't be happy either. But at some point, we've talked about this forever, we've got to bite the bullet and vote one way or the other. You know, and I have talked to some of these gentlemen, I've certainly talked to them in the past. And if I make the decision to vote for Class B to have full alcohol, I realize it's not necessarily in their best interest, and 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years isn't going to change that. You know, at some point, we've got to make a decision. And we've had 2 workshops on this, and it's not just recently that this has been talked about. It's been talked about for a long time. So I just think, at some point, we gotta make up our minds and vote on it one way or the other.
Further discussion? Okay, Councilmember Kraskowiak. So, and right now, we're still discussing whether to table it or not.
Table motion, right. So if we were tabled, do we need to table it to amend the verbiage for either the term grocery or perishable or primary use of grocery in the 25,000 square foot of retail?
No.
No. Okay.
Anything beyond that, we might though.
We might,
That
yeah.
depends on how big it is.
I mean,
Okay.
would you think that if we change the size of the retail facility that
If
we
we start to
might?
make multiple changes, it becomes sort of significant enough. I guess my thought is that we're changing it to grocery, we're narrowing it further versus expansion, so that perhaps does not become a minor, or keeps as a sort of minor change. If we make other changes, it becomes more significant, then we're simply gonna we'll reintroduce it or have another introduction.
Sure.
Is that what you had, Mr. Stemmer? Okay. All right. I guess I will speak against tabling it. I would like to get the introduction done, and if, we had a very robust workshop where we allowed everybody to speak for as long as they would like, and I don't, it's never gonna be a win where, when we're adding more competition in town. So I'm gonna just support moving forward with it. Any other discussion on tabling it? So this is a vote whether to table. So if the majority say aye, then it will be tabled. Okay. All in favor of tabling the introduction signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye. And the motion fails. So now we're back to the introduction. Is there any other questions before we consider this introduced?
This is discussion? This is.
Well, if you have any questions or anything else that you want to talk about before we say this is officially introduced, because we don't make a motion on, we don't
Okay.
vote on introducing it. We just introduce it.
So I do that. So if we introduce this tonight, it's gonna come back to us in a session or two for the full vote on the ordinance.
2 weeks.
August 2nd.
It
Tuesday,
will
August 2nd.
automatically come up in 2 weeks. If we haven't decided on the right verbiage for the 25,000 square feet or the right verbiage for the grocery terminology, do we pull it back and reintroduce it with new language? I'm asking if that's how it would work.
Right now, we're only talking about changing from retail to grocery, which would further tighten it. Mr.
I
Brody?
assume, and I guess it depends, we can come back with some language or maybe even an alternative of sort of grocery versus leaving it as is. I don't think that would be a significant change. So we could vote on that. If council felt like they wanted further discussion, it could be tabled. Or if council didn't like it at all, it could be voted down. If there are other changes that council likes that night, wants to make, 25 to 50, or we want to keep it at alcohol, or at wine and beer only, something like that. We might be getting enough significant changes that would require a reintroduction, so we would probably, likely, I guess, probably table that, or we'd figure out something and then reintroduce it with that suggested language. We'd make the amendment and reintroduce it at the next council meeting, if that makes sense.
Sure. Does that answer your question?
It does. And
Okay.
the next council meeting is actually on a Wednesday, right?
Right.
Because of the
Yeah, 19.
19th, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
okay. All right, if there's no other discussion, then we will consider the ordinance amending the Class B off-sale liquor license, liquor regulations introduced. And we will be looking at it again on Wednesday, August 2nd. All right. All right. We are now at the open mic, public comment part of the meeting. Anybody has anything for open mic this evening? Open mic provides an opportunity for the public to address the city council on subjects that are not part of the regular meeting agenda. The public is invited to express any concerns they may have which are relevant to the affairs, policies, or practices of the city of Coon Rapids. Remarks will be limited to 3 minutes, and should you wish to participate in open mic, please approach the podium, state your name and address before addressing the council. Yeah, go ahead.
Kathy Wistenberg, 882 90th Avenue Northwest, and I have a question. This is the first time we've approached the city council meeting in regards to the parking lot agenda that you just spoke. And if I heard it right, you passed it without any more of our hearsay? How come nobody wanted to hear anything more from the neighbors? I realize that's part of your agenda you just had, but
Yeah.
we were planning
You're
on
curious.
coming here.
Yeah, so the appeal process was at the planning commission, and then
Right.
we were given everything from that, and then most of us watched the planning commission and watched the appeals, and it didn't seem to be any reason. So I
So
mean,
we
your
were
voice
not-
was heard. Your voice was heard. We listened to you speak to the planning commission, and we read your appeals, and,
And you're going to vote your way anyway. So our voice really wasn't heard.
well, just
I'd
because,
like to make
just
one
because you don't agree
statement.
with the decision doesn't mean your voice wasn't heard.
As they say, you can't fight City Hall, but we seriously thought we'd be able to come in here and point out a few other things that weren't made in the prior, but obviously that didn't happen.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else here for open mic? Yeah, we'll close open mic. We don't have any reports on previous open mics, and we are to other business. Sorry. At least it was on virus, it's on silent.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Johnson.
If I could just extend my appreciation, and I know others did this at the earlier meeting, and the one on July 5th, to the fire department, to the police department, for all the great work that they did on the 4th of July and the festival, and also to the citizens who sent in photographs of it. It was a remarkable evening, and the fireworks with the lightning in the background were, I mean, they were epic. So thank you from me to you all. I wish I would have been here to be able to say that at the last meeting, but thank you.
Yeah, Chief Wise?
And Mr. Mayor, that works out, thank you, Councilmember Johnson, to be a great segue to what's coming up soon in the future. As important an event as 4th of July is to the city of Coon Rapids, I'd like to say that equally as important is Tuesday, August 1st, which is our Night to Unite, which coincides with the National Night Out, which is a very important crime prevention initiative for citizens, the primary purpose of which is for neighbors to get to know each other better. And we want to encourage as many citizens as possible to host parties. Traditionally, we've had more than 100 neighborhood parties in our city. Ideally, we'd like to get to 200 parties. The safest neighborhoods in Coon Rapids are those where people know each other well. It's not being a nosy neighbor, it's knowing your neighbors and looking out for each other. So I want to strongly encourage people to take part.
Your time is up.
It's not, carry
Mr. Mayor, will you grant me 10 more seconds?
on. Take as much time as you like.
Thank you very much. I want to encourage people who've never taken part in a Night to Unite party is to go to one in your neighborhood, simply drop in. Or if you don't know of a party, contact the police department and offer to host one. We'll help you put one together. And it's as simple as just putting a flyer on your neighbor's door to say, come to my driveway on Tuesday, August 1st, and get to know us and get to know each other. Police cars will be out visiting sites. Fire trucks will be out visiting these parties. I know a number of council members make it a point to get out to and meet and greet as many people as they possibly can to build those personal relationships. But I certainly hope we get a lot of parties this year. And again, either call the police department or go onto the City of Coon Rapids website. Right now, we have a nice picture right on the front of the website. It's a police car. Just click on that and it'll lead you right into it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's so key. I mean, if the neighbors just get out there, even make that introduction the first time, so the next time they drive by, they go, hey, Bill, how you doing? You know, it's just, get those names, Bill or whoever.
And actually, and let me say this, is that I know in my own neighborhood in Coon Rapids, there's that neighbor that I've been meaning to meet that moved in 5 years ago that I never did. I'm taking the time to get to know those neighbors, and I know every neighborhood has one of those neighbors. They've been there a long time, just for whatever reason, you have a cross paths. Use this year as the opportunity to say, I want to get to know you.
Yeah, absolutely. Other business. All right. I would like to mention an ordinance that we passed at our last meeting, and I would like us to consider looking at it, taking another look at it, sometime before it goes into effect in September. I've gotten some really good letters from some property managers that are very frustrated with our new recycling ordinance that will go into effect September 1st. And they articulate many reasons why this isn't a good fit for them, including the last one I got just before I left was, we have people moving out the end of every month, the equivalent of a 1,000 square foot home of carpeting that ends up down in the dumpster. We're never gonna make this one for one. We need a big garbage dumpster. There's many reasons. I would just like us to have another conversation about this before it ever goes into enforcing. So I don't know what that means we need to look like or what we need to do.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Johnson?
I would concur on that. I've gotten a few phone calls as well, and so I'd like to see it show up on a workshop. And there's the other one that I think I had put to city staff, which relates to the garage sizes, which maybe we could have the conversation about both those ordinances at the same time.
Yeah. I went driving around on my motorcycle through the different ones and ran into one of the drivers. And he goes, oh yeah, well this place, yeah, they're meeting the ordinance by going to a smaller dumpster for trash and then larger recycling bins. And he said, but they never even filled their 90 gallons before. He said their waste was always full, so now that recycling bin's gonna be trashed when I get there to empty that. And you're going, okay, clearly, you know what, we got some tweaking, I think, that needs to happen here, because some of these units are just, they're not gonna participate. But, Mr. Stemwedel. Oh,
We'll
Councilmember
defer
Wells.
to Councilmember
Yeah.
Wells.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think realistically, we're looking at a time frame with, a summer in the city meeting, national night out, that maybe if we just delay enforcement, it'll give us time to have that work session. If, we don't have to start enforcing it September 1st, even if it's on the books, because I don't think the reality of it is we're gonna have time to make changes by September 1st.
Yeah. Or even that is the changes to delay, would we have to take an official action to delay enforcement?
Probably not if we.
No, we can.
Staff made that.
Make a policy call.
Okay. Mr. Stemwedel.
Yeah, Mayor Council, that was going to be my comment is, August is fairly tight in terms of work sessions, that if we took that approach, I think either in late August or September, then we'd have time. So we could make it sort of known that, based on this discussion, assuming there's consensus, that we want to bring this back, that we will sort of hold off until further dialogue has happened and to see where that direction goes.
Okay, thank you.
And I
Mr.
would
Hammer.
add, Mr. Mayor, if you have anything in email format or written format, or if you wanted to send us so we know what those issues are. I know Colleen and Stephanie have had several meetings and phone calls with people already expressing their concerns, but it'd be nice to know exactly what those issues are so we can research them before we come back.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Demmer?
Speaking of summer in the city, the next Summer in the City neighborhood meeting is July 25th at Sand Creek Park, which is
Nice.
certainly worth coming to, even if you're not in that neighborhood. So come, see the fire truck, see the police truck, see the cornerstone of civilization,
Some ice cream.
and get some ice cream.
Will there be concessions on that Tuesday night?
We'll be open.
Will be open?
We're open for softball, so we'll be open.
All right. Other business?
Move to adjourn.
Excuse me, can I know open mic is over, but, I don't know if I can approach the.
How about we adjourn the meeting and then you can talk to us? We had a motion. Is there a second to adjourn?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We're adjourned.